We all know what side Gene's going to be on. He's going to be some fence for some criminal organization.
No, that's the White Knight, Gene Lyons. Come in here and save the day. Tell us, Gene.
Yeah, I can't even play a crook on a video game. Like, I can't play Grand Theft Auto. It makes me too uncomfortable.
He's out there saving people, like putting them back in their cars.
It's totally true. It's totally true.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love and growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene, great ass, Lyons.
Well, you know, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of each podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shout on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, and Game of Thrones. We just finished season 2 of Westworld, so go check all that out. You can check out all the information at shoutontv.com. That being said, Big D, Carrie Gross, welcomed us with her presence on our last episode of Labyrinth. She's not with us tonight.
No, she blessed us with her presence. And unfortunately, she couldn't make it today, but I think later in the week, we're going to try to catch up and double up on our episodes. So she may be joining us next week. We hope she can. But this week is a very special week. We are not doing a voted on category. This was a listener from Birmingham, Alabama, Zach. And Zach's been very patient. Back in, I think it was probably April, he was a little upset with the whole Heat controversy where Heat had, the voting had been manipulated a little by me to make the real genius win.
Russian hackers hacked the voting system and swung the vote for not even a good movie. It wasn't even good. We all hated Real Genius.
So he said, you know what? Screw the voting process, screw democracy. I'm going to pay my way in. So he sponsored us and commissioned the 1995 classic Heat.
It's truly the American way.
It is, and it works.
Yeah, it definitely works.
Why wait in line when you can get the fast pass?
Yeah, exactly.
So he wrote, "Hey, Shat crew, I'm writing because I'd like to commission a review of Michael Mann's masterpiece, Heat. I've noticed that it's been up for voting in several categories, and I'm shocked it hasn't won. I'm shocked as well. I have come to learn that many people, especially males around me my age, I'm 30, haven't seen this movie. I found myself introducing my friends to this movie one by one for the last 10 years. This is by far my favorite film ever. It inspires me deeply. I went on to get my graduate degree in film, in large part because of the work of Michael Mann and other filmmakers like him. I proudly display in my apartment the same poster that I stared at in my local Blockbuster years ago. Cheers. Thanks for the review. Zach S. from Birmingham, Alabama."
Yeah, I really like this email. The fact that anything, especially a movie like this, can inspire you to go on and pursue a passion that you love based upon the works of Michael Mann. And Michael Mann is an interesting filmmaker. I think he definitely fills a niche, but I think it's awesome that not only do we have a listener that would write in, and by the way, this was a much longer email that we had to condense for time, but the fact that like people who actually went to film school listen to this podcast. I think that's crazy. I feel like Zach knows so much more about film, and we just hear we shat all over, his dream, the movie that gave him purpose in life.
I minored in theater, so
that's not surprising. Well, he is a 1995 American crime film written, co-produced, and directed by Michael Mann. It stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Val Kilmer, Ashley Judd, and a slew of other actors that you're like, whoa, Tom Sizemore, where'd he come from? Jeremy Piven? What? That's great. The Nationwide guy? Fantastic. The story actually is based on a former Chicago police officer, Chuck Adamson's pursuit of the 1960s criminal McCauley, after whom De Niro's character is also named. Heat is a remake by Mann of an unproduced television series he had worked on, the pilot of which was released as LA Takedown in 1989. It was released on December 15th, 1995, and opened number 3 at the box office behind Jumanji and Toy Story. It was a critical and commercial success, grossing $67 million in the United States and $187 million worldwide against a $60 million budget. It also ranks as the 25th highest grossing film of 1995 and reports 86% positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. We always ask, where were you, or what are your first memories of this movie? We'll start with you, Dick.
This was definitely a blockbuster Friday night, date night movie. I was in college, and I just remember it being slow and boring, and I ended up in the end being unimpressed. I don't know if it was because I was, with a date at the time, and I was hoping for something action. We could, get a little excited, get into it. Instead, the 3-hour movie, you have to sit and focus on it. So it didn't leave a huge impression on me. I was clueless, and I wouldn't have ever given it a second viewing. I don't think I ever would have gone back. Like Casino, we were afraid to go watch a 3-hour movie. This, if it wasn't for Zach, I would have missed out, because I have a true appreciation for this movie now that back then I was just too clueless to see.
What about you, Gene?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that people either hadn't watched Heat or didn't appreciate Heat, because growing up in my household, Heat was a sacred film. It was viewed often. We rented it, and then I think it was one of the few films that we actually owned in-house, which was like a rarity in my household. We're not collectors or hoarders by any means. And so I think this was the year, 1995, when my mind really developed enough to understand like mob movies and heist flicks. And so I spent the following summer obsessed with like the Godfather series, Goodfellas, A Bronx Tale, all these other movies. And Heat was in that rotation. So I've seen it several times. I'm a big fan of it. And even for shits and giggles, sometimes my cousins and I, when we get together, we'll just watch the infamous, glorious, amazing, middle of the road shootout after the bank heist, which we'll get to later. But again, for me, this is a big, big movie in my life.
I definitely remember this movie being released in theaters. I remember the media, kind of like the hubbub around it, like the heat, if you will, for the movie Heat. Not only was it a Michael Mann movie, but it also starred Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, who I think hadn't been in a film together since Godfather, and I don't think they had ever acted against each other. Is that right?
No, they were in The Godfather 2 together, but they never shared the same actual scene.
Right. So this was the first movie that you had these, and this is before like the Avengers is today, where you have A-list actors all in, a movie playing against each other. This was the first time you really had Pacino and De Niro, and they were together. And you look at De Niro. De Niro looks good. Like De Niro, he looks young, spry. You're like, this doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess it was. But I definitely did not see this in the theaters. This was for sure a dual tape rental from Blockbuster. You remember these, Big D? Like you can't fucking fit them through the return slot. These things were the worst. Yeah. You had to rewind 2 tapes, because DVDs didn't come out till like 99. So I believe I was like you. I tried watching this. It was definitely boring. I probably watched it in my in the guest room with my high school girlfriend, and we probably just ignored the movie and just had sex, which was this was the perfect movie if you wanted to have sex with your high school girlfriend at your parents' house, because it was 3 hours long and it gave you a reason to have the door locked. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, you're giving yourself way too much credit.
No, I'm just saying you could go like more times. Like today, like I still have I have the stamina of a 17-year-old, meaning like it takes me just as long as a 17-year-old. But I just fall asleep a lot faster. Back then you were like, I'm ready to go again. I was like ringing a bell like at a car dealership. It was great.
What a lucky girl.
Oh man, she hated me. Big D, play the trailer.
He's here. I can feel it.
You search for the scent of your prey, and then you hunt them down. That's the only thing you're committed to.
It keeps me sharp, on the edge, where I gotta be. want to be making moves on the street. Allow nothing to be in your life that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner.
No, my life's a disaster zone because I spend all my time chasing guys like you around the block.
I do what I do best. I take scores. You do what you do best, trying to stop guys like me.
You've been walking through our life dead.
All I am is what I'm going after.
From The Godfather to Scent of a Woman.
What do we got?
From Raging Bull to Goodfellas.
Assume they got our phones, assume they got our houses, assume they got us.
Their performances have created a legacy of landmark films.
I want full surveillance. That's 24 hours, round the clock. We never close, open 7 days a week.
Now, for the first time, America's two most electrifying actors collide.
With this guy, there's one sheep you should pass. The bank is worth the risk. You should take it down. 12.2 million. You're up.
This crew is good.
It ain't worth the risks you take. Like in risk versus reward, baby.
You're fugitive number one with a bullet.
I'm double the worst trouble you ever had.
If I'm there and I gotta put you away, I won't like it. But I'll tell you, you are going down.
What if you do got me boxed in and I gotta put you down? Because no matter what, you will not get in my way. I will not hesitate for a second.
Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer in a Michael Mann film. Heat.
Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro, is a highly skilled career criminal, and his crew, made up of Val Kilmer, Tom Sizemore, and Danny Trejo, hire an outsider named Waingro to help them steal bearer bonds from an armored car. During the heist, Waingro impulsively kills one guard, forcing the crew to kill him as well. McCauley gives the order to kill the third guard so as not to leave an eyewitness, but is furious with Waingro for the unnecessary escalation. The crew attempts to kill Waingro, but he escapes.
So before we get to any of the action, I want to rewind just to the opening credits and go over this cast. As you mentioned before, Roger, we've got Pacino, we've got De Niro, we've got Val Kilmer. Jon Voight is in this. I believe he's Angelina Jolie's dad is his famous role now. But you know, he's an accomplished actor in his own right. Tom Sizemore, Diane Venora, Amy Brenneman, who is in The Leftovers. Ashley Judd, as you mentioned before, Dennis Haysbert from 24, and also is it Allstate commercials?
Is it Allstate? I think it is Allstate. It's not Nationwide.
It is Allstate.
Natalie Portman, of course, Hank Azaria, who did several characters like Herman's Head, The Simpsons, and lots of other comedies. He was also in The Birdcage, amazing. Danny Trejo, of Machete fame, and then also you got famous musicians Henry Rollins, Tone Loc.
Oh, that's
and then
right.
Of course, Bud Cort from Harold and Maude fame, and as you mentioned, Jeremy Piven. So, and that's just some of them. We'll get to some of the other people who popped up later, but this is a star-studded cast, and then you roll right into that opening action. And the first thing I thought was this opening action scene of the armored car scene. It's better than most movies' climaxes, and this is just getting stuff started. And immediately on display is that amazing sound design. The visuals are intense. I love that the guards were like deaf, and they added, a bit of realism. As soon as that explosion went off, I'm like, those guards would be deaf. And then they were. It was intense, sharp, coherent action. Loved it.
Yeah, a lot of the movie, I think, holds up because of the amount of time that Michael Mann spent. He spent 7 months researching, doing ride-alongs with the cops, and he wanted everything to be as accurate as possible. Down to, you mentioned the sound, the guns, the weapons. They usually do everything post, where they go back and they add in the sound of the weapons. He found it wasn't as terrorizing, it wasn't as fierce. So they actually went and incorporated the sounds they recorded on set, trying to make this as real as he could. And I think it shows on screen.
Well, one of the highlights of this film, and you'll see this throughout, especially with the, this opening scene, that I believe I was like, wow, like how did I not love this movie because it starts off so great, is that the action really sets the characters. Like it establishes who the characters are, and it lets us know the characters' personalities through action in a visual medium, which I appreciate, versus having to rely on exposition or scenes with characters that in a lesser movie, you'd be like, God, this is so boring. This is so boring. The action establishes the characters.
Yeah, Raj, you mentioned in Goonies how that didn't work for you because, when they were trying to do the action and show us who everybody was, the action was too goofy. It was distracting. It didn't make a lot of sense. In this case, they did an amazing job. Mann did an amazing job, and the cast did, of really using the action in a realistic setting to show us who everybody was. You see McCauley as the calculated one. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to kill anybody unnecessarily, but he understands the legal pros and cons to killing. As Pacino points out, once you've got murder one, why not take out everybody else? Because you're going to get put away for life anyway. The way that, Chris, Val Kilmer's character, uses his tools like a whiz. So, he's the whiz guy, the gadget guy. The way that Sharito, Tom Sizemore's character, uses his rifle. He's kind of the most deadly one. And then Waingro is the unstable one. And you see all that just with very little dialogue and a lot of action.
Well, they even use no dialogue to establish a character. So when Waingro, is being picked up, you get the feel, like, you automatically know he's a new guy to the crew. He's a loudmouth. He's asking all these questions that you should never ask on a job like this. You got Sharito, who's a veteran of this crew that has their shit together. They're that's a well-oiled machine. And he's like, hey, shut the fuck up. Like, like game faces. Like I don't know what he says specifically, but like, that's a perfect use of dialogue to shut someone up, to like tell who the characters are. I really enjoyed that. That's a skill that in the hands of a lesser director or producer or writer, they couldn't pull that off.
Listen, Slick, they establish Waingro as a clown even before he gets in the truck.
Yeah, at the hot dog stand.
He comes out of the employee's bathroom, asshole move number 1. He then walks up and says, give me a refill. The guy working by the counter goes, now the fucking dude wants a refill. He's an asshole before he gets into the truck. But Gene was talking about how everyone had their job and they were believable. I always, I dive down the rabbit holes with this. I watched the behind the scenes that was done around the time that the movie was released. And they talk about that Michael Mann, when you see that first crime scene, they look so proficient because all the CSI employees, they're not extras. They're actually CSI that were just brought on as extras. The cops there that are questioning and canvassing the crowd, those are real cops. At the end of production, when the movie was released, Michael Mann rewarded all these extras with Screen Actors Guild cards. So he wanted everyone on screen to look as real as possible.
And talking about realism, we see, as you mentioned before, Raj, a lot of movies like The Avengers, where you've got these massive destruction. Buildings are crumbling, cars are getting thrown around. Sometimes meteors are hitting people or whatever. And it doesn't have that same visceral impact. You don't really feel that. But I tell you, when that armored car gets hit by the truck, you feel it. I mean, there is a realism there. There's a shock there when you see that kind of power on display. Again, with the explosions and everything else, I really felt this movie.
Well, I think it's why Terminator 2 still holds up in that, like, they use practical effects. Like, James Cameron does a really good job of not overloading CGI. I mean, this is before he decided to do that. So like that, like when you see entire real dump trucks flip over, there's an element of like, wow, I'm witnessing something that a production crew had to go out and figure out a way to put all this on film, make it look and feel believable. But like just the logistics of having to shut down areas in and around LA, which they never do anymore, right? It's always Atlanta or Vancouver. Like it was such a nice throwback to be like, wow, it's set in LA, and oh, wow, it is in LA.
Yeah, I mean, Heat was shot primarily on location. They had 65 locations throughout LA that they used. There was only one soundstage. So LA is almost an additional character to the cast. And it just blends in and bleeds into it to where the city is always a backdrop for what's going on. But to get back to that armored car, so many times in Hollywood, even practical effects can be cheesy, where you see a car, instead of flipping over, it like jumps, it rotates, it lands on its roof, it twists. This was a real dump truck hitting a real armored car. And all they did was loaded the top of the armored car, so it was top heavy. They hit it and flipped it over. There was no CGI. That was as real as it gets, and it actually shocked some of the people on set.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier in the email from Zach that not only did it inspire him, but it also inspired other filmmakers like Chris Nolan. Like, this is very reminiscent of in The Dark Knight when they flip over the semi-truck. And if you ever watched any of the behind the scenes of The Dark Knight, they actually flipped over like a loaded semi-truck. I think that was the first time they had ever accomplished that feat on film, where it like goes from front, from back to front all the way over. That had to have been inspired by Heat. Like, it feels the same. It's very visceral and real. And I think that's also why so many people think that not only is The Dark Knight a good comic book movie, but it's also just a good movie because it reminds people of Heat.
Yeah, and that makes me think here. I want to ask you guys. I was in the military, so I had a little more exposure to it. And, that Gene was in the junior ROTC. So, he has that
right
going for him. But I wanted to, did you notice a difference between the way the crew went about its work in this movie as opposed to what we've traditionally been watching in these 80s and 90s movies?
What's the movie with the surf people and the presidents?
Point Break.
Point Break. But there was a little similarities between that movie. Like, at least in Point Break, like, they never go to the vault. They have certain rules. And I think that's a skill that Michael Mann has over directors like Michael Bay. Michael Mann lets the audience understand without a lot of motion. Like, I don't know, it was pretty well done. But yeah, it definitely feels
more
like
real.
You're there alongside them as they're going on.
Because for me, I love how disciplined they are. There's almost no spoken words between the crew. Everyone has a job. They know what to do. They're prepared, like Gene said. They've got everything they need. They pull out the spike strips. They've obviously walked through it and they've rehearsed it. They're efficient. They move with a purpose. And in the military, you're taught that typically violence of action wins the day. And violence of action means that you want to act with unrestricted use of speed, strength, and purpose and totally dominate a situation in order to win. And they do that here. They hit that armored truck, they move, and it reminded me a lot of the way that they shoot it with a first person. It felt like Call of Duty today, where I don't remember other movies that the camera is following each of the players and member of the crew, to where I felt like I was playing Call of Duty. And it was very real to me. Somebody who's has some limited experience with this. It felt genuine. Plus, I've played around with linear shape charges, so I have that too.
Well, also think about like 1995, right? This film had to have been shot in 1993, 1994 using older technology when cameras were still shot on film and were much heavier. So you can imagine having to like carry all that equipment to get that type of first person shot with the equipment that they had. Like, it's easy today to use Steadicam and have that first person experience. Back then, this is groundbreaking filmmaking. Like, I would assume so, right? Zach, right in. But not only were they proficient, but like, Big D, so you played with explosives. When they put the explosives on the armor car and they blow out the back, that looked and felt like how an actual explosives would be versus maybe some, more Hollywood approach to explosions. The one thing I got to ask you though, would that type of explosion also blow out the windows in like a car park nearby? Like, is that like, what type of explosion would take that type of force?
So in the military, I was a combat engineer and I was a graduate of the Sapper Leader course. So we work with improvised explosives. I worked with C4 and a lot of different explosives throughout my career. And I got to tell you, one of the mistakes that movies always make is if you ever see an explosion that's supposed to be C4 and it's got flame, where there's flame to it, that's not accurate. That's not realistic. C4 is a cutting. It's almost clean. And the shockwave probably would have blown the windows out. And at Sapper School, what's nice is they have a graveyard of all vehicles. And they normally, if you go to a range, it was very restrictive. Here's a block of C4. We're going to blow up this abutment. We're going to set up this obstacle. We're going to breach. It's Sapper School. They give you endless explosives and say, hey, go out in the field and see what you can do. And we had like naval shape charges, which is C4 liquefies copper and focuses the liquid copper into almost like something the size of a quarter through, I think it was probably like 8 inches of solid steel. We were out there with these shape charges that almost like a little L, like you would put under your door to keep the cold air out. But if you focus a blast, we would cut steel plate. We would put holes into vehicles. It's very similar. And the fact that they line those up in a square, it would easily cut through the side of that armored car. So that seemed real to me. But what I want to check out is, could you legally really buy linear shape charges with just a driver's license back in 95?
That would be so easy to track these guys. Like, where are they getting their equipment from for stuff like that? Like, it's overly complicated. The other thing is like, now, I mean, this is like pre 9/11 and pre, all the Homeland Security where your every movement is tracked. But like the improvised explosive device that they throw into their getaway ambulance, like that's got to be something you can't just buy off of
Well, that was just like a cooking timer and like a gallon of milk filled with gasoline.
Oh, is that what it was? Oh, okay.
This was well before the internet. But now if you just Google any of this, you'll probably get the FBI at your door. But it's not that difficult, and that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 90s, we were already doing Anarchist Cookbook and getting this stuff, and we didn't have internet access. This was just on bulletin board systems, and I've made a few things, but there's got to be somebody out there right now who's listening to us and going, "But I didn't like this movie." And so for you, my friend, I will point out some flaws that made me kind of scratch my head. One of them was the whole thing starts out with a stolen ambulance. And Robert De Niro just waltzes his ass into a hospital, walks right over to the ambulance, and suddenly he's got one. And again, knowing cops, having worked at newspapers before, if an ambulance were stolen from a hospital, especially in a major metro area, every cop in LA is looking for that ambulance. It is the worst vehicle to use for a heist because it's so conspicuous. Like there is no way in hell that they're using this ambulance. And especially if all you're trying to do is stop the vehicle, an ambulance seems like a terrible choice.
No, but I think they did that on purpose. The ambulance kind of disarms the armed guards. You wouldn't think that there's an ambulance involved. If it was a normal vehicle that pulled out and blocked them, they'd be sensing ambush. But you're like, it's a fucking ambulance. There's obviously somebody hurt around here. That was what I got from it.
Yeah, but how does the ambulance get to there without people seeing it? Like it is a very conspicuous vehicle.
What's a major metropolitan area? And again, this is like pre-GPS. So I'm sure there's no trackers on this ambulance. So it stands to reason. There's multiple ambulance companies in Los Angeles. It's a major metropolitan area. It's the first or second largest population with all this urban sprawl. Like they're looking for you. I mean, you truly are looking for a needle in a haystack. Yes, it's a conspicuous vehicle, but I think it's a little bit more difficult in 1994, 1995 to track an ambulance than it is today. But like, let's not just talk about the vehicles or how they could pull this off. Let's talk about the overcomplicated plot. So they
overcomplicated.
All right. So here's the situation. Typically in a heist movie, they steal cash or blah, 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 or they steal something that's of value. In this particular case, it's bearer bonds. I assume they're doing that because they want to establish that these crooks are, smarter than the average bear. But I was like, what the fuck is a bearer bond? And then they stole it from a drug dealer or a money launderer. Like, I don't understand. Okay. And then they're going to take it and they're going to resell it back.
Okay.
There's a middleman that's played by Jon Voight. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Okay.
Obviously, they stole the bearer bonds because they saw that it worked out in Nakatomi Plaza. So what they did was...
Get out of here.
Okay, that's exactly what they stole.
This shares the same universe as Die Hard.
Yeah, they share the same universe. It's called Our Universe.
Yes. Okay, so here's how it was, Roger. I'm going to break it down for you in something you could understand, okay? So now, the crew goes out and steals a car.
Okay.
The car belongs to Van Zandt. Van Zandt is a criminal who launders money. They say, you know what? The insurance is going to pay Van Zandt 100% for his stolen car. We know he's a bad guy. Why don't we go sell him his car back so we get 60% of the value? So Van Zandt gets 100% of the insurance. He pays them. He gets his car back.
Did they know they were stealing this guy's bearer bonds?
Only after Nate, Jon Voight tells them. So that's why he said, these belong to Van Zandt. He's not a good guy. We're going to make an extra $300,000 if we sell it back to him. And De Niro says, hey, go try it.
But it's costing them money. Like, I don't understand. Like, how do you steal a bearer bond? You can't just go into a bank and be like, here, I have some bearer bonds. I'd like them, please.
No, that's the whole point. Bearer bonds are untraceable. So you can go back and you can sell them. There's a black market for them. And you saw the size of them. Okay. They're not $100 each. They're $10,000, $100,000. Okay. I'm not an investment banker, but you can imagine each one's worth a substantial amount. It's like, look, Van Zandt, if you sold it back to him, he'd get you 60%, or you have to sell it to a chop shop that's only going to get you 30%.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So I would have to sell. So the assumption is the black market is not going to be as good as if I went back to the guy who's not only going to make money off the insurance, but he's also going to get the bearer bonds back.
Bingo.
I don't understand why Van Zandt's upset about this.
Because he said, you can't steal from me. If the word gets out in the street that you can steal from me and I won't hit back, then I look like the mark. So he's doing it to protect his reputation.
No, just keep doing this. Just keep doing this. I mean, you got insurance. Seems like another racket to go on the side. But you see how, like, to an average moviegoer, this is a little complicated. You could have accomplished this movie in 2 hours. That's my argument. At the end of this, I just feel like they overcomplicate it needlessly. And maybe that's the allure for some people, but I just feel like right off the bat, like, you have this amazing action scene with all the elements that we talked about. Then they try to overcomplicate the plot, and you're like, oh God, this is going to be crazy. Because then from there, you transition into this, holy shit, everyone has personal problems.
I just want to do the Rogers cut of Heat, where every time they say bearer bonds, there's just a voiceover that goes, jewels. Like, oh no, they stole Van Zant's jewels, but the insurance company will pay him back for his jewels, and then we can sell him his jewels for 60% of the value. Does that work? Like Goonies?
McCauley's fence, I guess that's his middleman, Nate, played by Jon Voight, suggests... I don't know, McCauley's fence.
You need a fence? You need a fence explained to you now?
What the fuck is a fence?
When you steal shit, you can't just sell it anywhere. You have a fence who liquidates the product.
I'm sorry, boys. I didn't grow up in the black market.
Okay, so if you go and you rob a house, okay? Or you burglarize a house,
Sure.
you have a fence. It's the person you sell that shit to who then has the avenues and the channels to sell that shit out. So a fence will either convert your stuff to dollars for you, or they will even give you a shopping list. So like right now I need laptops and phones, and you go out and you get those things.
But okay, all right. So now that I know what a fence is, Nate suggests that he sells the stolen bonds back to their original owner, money launderer Roger Van Sant, played by William Fichtner, who could not only profit off the insurance of the bonds, but also get his money back, get his bonds back. Van Sant agrees, but instructs his men to ambush McCauley at the meeting. McCauley survives the ambush and vows revenge against Van Sant.
Okay, so this is the one time that I had a problem with the crew. Val Kilmer is an absolute terrible spotter. You got one job. They're out in the middle of a drive-in theater. There's nothing around. How does Val Kilmer not see this dude getting out of the back of a trunk and sneaking up on De Niro until it's almost too late?
The only explanation I could think of is that his angle was just wrong, because he was at a fairly flat, it wasn't a super tall building. So, I mean, I guess it's possible, but I think this guy's losing his job for sure. He should. Like, you should be able to see, as a professional, enough motion to detect that something is wrong. And you know what? He does in the end.
He does. But I like the fact that it's not just a heist movie. It's not just Ocean's 11, where we're going to focus every scene on some job. They get the first job done, and then there's a couple storylines that they introduce that you're not sure how they're going to tie into the overall plot until they do at the end. And here you see that sometimes the simplest mistakes, as proficient as this crew is at what they're doing, it just takes that one mistake, letting Waingro survive the diner, and it turns this whole film around. If they had just tied up that one loose end, and Waingro, after this scene, he almost disappears for the next couple hours, that you forget how he's tied into it until he comes back at the end. And I like that. They did a good job of carrying multiple plot lines that some don't resolve into the end, but they tie them all up nicely.
I'm glad you brought up the Waingro thing, Big D, because in watching it, for people who haven't watched Heat in a while, if you don't remember, Waingro, they want to kill him because he screwed up the first heist and shot somebody unnecessarily. They go to kill him. They have a kind of a kill room set up in the trunk. They're going to pop him and take him away, and he escapes because the cops roll by. And then he kind of, he disappears for a while. But maybe it's because I've seen Carlito's Way a million times, but as soon as the Waingro scene popped up, I was like, oh no, you never let that guy go away. He's going to come back and bite you in the ass. And then I thought, well, maybe that's just because I know how these movies play out. But I was watching the movie with Carrie Gross, and Carrie even said, as soon as Waingro disappeared, she goes, that's going to come back later. So it was a little bit obvious, like that he was going to be, you didn't think he was really gone.
Yeah, no, obviously, he's going to come back. Also, Waingro sucks. Like, certainly you get the fact that he botched the heist and he was a little hot-headed and killed people unnecessarily, which threw a wrench into McCauley's plan. But they really do an effective job of making sure that we understand that this guy's a super slime ball. The fact that he kills a prostitute after a prostitute gives him great love. This is why prostitution, I feel like, should be legalized, like decriminalized, and some protections for sex workers, right? Like, because if prostitution was legal, do you think she survives?
I think if prostitution was legal, she might have a better chance, but but also she was an underage prostitute. So
was she underage?
Yeah, she was a teenage girl.
Okay, see, that's why you put regulations in place, and you're like, listen, you got to be of a certain age.
What is this, like the NBA? You got to be one and done? You got to go to like prostitute college for one season?
No, you got to be at least 18 and older, 21 and older. Certainly, they do it in the Netherlands. The point that I'm making is, you have this poor little 15-year-old saying stuff to, neo-Nazis like, man, you a hot dog. Like, who says that? Like, I want...
You do.
You a hot dog. But yeah, no, that really got me. I was really upset that he kills this beautiful, I didn't know she was underage. So, that's
Wait a second. When did Waingro become a neo-Nazi?
Yeah, he had a big swastika right on his chest.
He did.
Yep.
He did.
He might just be Zoroastrian.
No, that's definitely not true.
But, the movie's 3 hours. If you wanted to cut something, we didn't need, I agree with you, the serial killer prostitute component.
Right.
We already know he's a dirtbag.
That's right.
He screwed up. He shoots that poor guard when they said to him, can't you see the stuff oozing out of his ears? We know he's got a problem. You could have shaved off. Maybe they just wanted to show that Pacino's character had some compassion and tie it into the storyline and the family troubles that he was having at home.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, not to overcomplicate this, but this is the point that makes the movie bloated. You could have Waingro, a guy who botched a robbery, then escape, just go. And that stresses out De Niro's character. And the fact that he has this guy out there that may be, offering up information. Like, you didn't have to have this whole other serial killer subplot that didn't make any sense. You know that Waingro is eventually going to get it back to like Van Sant. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to have this extra scene. Like, we already said he's a fucking slime ball. Now you're just pouring it on. It's extra information that the movie doesn't need.
No, I disagree. I think that 3 hours was long for Casino. Here, it deserved every minute of the almost 3 hours time.
No,
it was action, slow burn action. And by the end, you needed to care about all the characters. You needed to understand their motivations. You needed to understand that the cops and the robbers, even though they were on opposite sides of the fence, they were both very similar. They were almost identical. Just one was on the side of the law and one wasn't.
Well, LAPD Major Crimes Unit Lieutenant Vincent Hanna, played by Al Pacino, is called in to investigate the robbery. An informant connects Chirito to the robbery, and Hanna's team surveils him, leading them to the rest of the crew. They set up a stakeout, but their presence is detected by McCauley, and the crew abandons the job. Hanna opts to let them go so he can continue gathering evidence against the crew.
So this is going to be my first knock against the movie. Obviously, Al Pacino, at this point, him and De Niro are both at the top of their games. Pacino's young. He looks as good as he's going to look, but every time he's in a movie, he has a love scene or a romantic interaction with somebody, and it seems so forced and awkward. I can picture him going to the director and saying, I want this shot to be seen this way. It's like he's trying to prove to the audience that he's a great lover. And it's just gross. I felt like I was watching my father making moves on like a young waitress at a restaurant.
I just want to point out Al Pacino was 55 in 1955. He was born in 1940. So he's not a young buck here.
No, but we don't need to see him with that chain hanging and his hair out. And every time that he's done with a love scene, there's like the woman is left out of breath, smoking. Like, we can see that Pacino just pleasured her.
Like, I get, like, if you want to, like, have a sex scene or blah, 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 but, like, they really focus in on Al Pacino. Like, he's shirtless and he's not wearing a long sleeve shirt. Like, is there anything less sexy than watching a gratuitous sex scene with Al Pacino at 55? Those big hairy arms, yuck. It's like watching Robin Williams have sex. Also, Mom of the Year banging Al Pacino while her daughter's, like, looking for berets.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a result of us now having access to porn on the internet, but I found myself in watching the scene going, why the hell did they even have sex scenes in movies? Yeah. It's always like every time I see a sex scene now, I'm just like, what the hell is the point of this? Like, I don't want to see these people have sex anyway. Like, can we just get on with the story, please?
No, and I don't need a solo Pacino shower scene. What the hell? I don't need to see him washing off.
I think from the get-go, though, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, Pacino just seemed ridiculous in this movie. I didn't care for his performance. They build this movie as these two powerhouse performances, De Niro on one side, Pacino on the other. But De Niro, up until this point, I'm like, he's a badass. I love watching him on screen. He's great. Pacino is getting his ass kicked as far as the acting chops here. De Niro comes off as a complex professional. Pacino is this weird, like, mix between Scarface and Son of a Woman. He's doing these weird talks like this. And like, even again, the sex scene is weird. His interaction with Natalie Portman is weird. I just felt like he seemed completely out of his depth in this movie.
Is this where Pacino kind of became really strange?
Yeah.
You know, there's where it was like in The Devil's Advocate, or there was at some point, and Scent of a Woman or Scent
of a Woman was before this. Shortly, so 1997, I believe, was Devil's Advocate, or 99. I don't know. It was based in Gainesville, Florida, which I really like. They shot some scenes in Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah, this is how it went. It went Scent of a Woman, 92, Carlito's Way, 93, Heat, 95, Donnie Brasco, 97, Devil's Advocate, 97. So this is right where he started into that hoo-ha, where he's just yelling and creepy and has a Southern accent.
He becomes a caricature of himself. This is where it becomes easy to do like everyone can do an Al Pacino impersonation, because he focuses on those weird, sweet patterns and, oh, great ass, and Any Given Sunday, which is still, he delivers a pretty good speech there at the end.
So contrary to how awkward Pacino is, you have De Niro, who's smooth. He goes into the bookstore. He's studying up on metals because he always wants to get better. And he picks up Edie, and they're standing on the patio of her apartment overlooking the city. And the conversation it's that late night nervous where they're getting to know each other. It seemed so real, where you're going out and you're meeting somebody for the first time and you're getting to know each other in this small chat and the conversation where, both of you are just thinking, God, can we just somebody break the ice? Let's have sex. It made me really not miss those days of being single, but seemed very real.
Yeah, and unlike Pacino, De Niro, takes the nice glass, he wraps the napkin around it, leaves it like class. The guy is pure class, and I think that's the difference in this movie, or can kind of allows us to forgive some of the faults of the movie, is that the movie's just got a little bit of class to it. And I think a big part of that is you see those dinners between the cops and all the crooks, and you're like, you forget for a second that there is no way in hell this actually happens, right? Like, these thieves who are pulling off heists are taking their wives out. They're all going, like, it's like they're the fucking mob. Like, they're all going out together. They're laughing. They're flashing gifts around. And this, to me, contradicts McCauley's cautious nature. I could believe it a little bit with the cops, but I know I don't even have this kind of relationship with any coworkers I've ever had.
No, and you talk about the two family dinners, and it's shot in a way, Michael Mann, what he does, and it's typical Michael Mann, and once you notice it, you'll see it in all of his movies. He uses a long lens. It's meant for shooting subjects that are far away. And what it does is when you use a long lens, it crowds the subjects into the frame. And it causes the whole background to blur out and become almost liquid. You see it in almost all of his shots of the city where the lights aren't, you can't really see them. It's a bit of a blur. And he wanted to have it look like everyone crowding the frame like they were under surveillance. So those two dinner scenes to where we see that the crew comes out of dinner, it's meant to show us that they're under surveillance, and much of the movie is shot like that. But the cops and the robbers are very much alike. There's very little difference that separates them. They're both, different sides of the same coin.
I'm glad you brought up the surveillance, Big D, because I do want to talk about that a little bit. This is the first time that we see the cops onto this crew, and the crew is in the middle of that precious metals heist, and they abandon it. And the reason why they abandon it is De Niro is standing in the shadows as kind of the lookout, and he hears a single bump from a truck in an industrial complex in LA. And that causes him to call the whole job off. So you're like, okay, I might believe that if he was super cautious and this was just his MO, that anytime anything seemed even slightly off, he pulls the job. But then we repeatedly see him throw caution to the wind, and not just in the finale of the movie, but he's taunting the cops. He's asking around the crew, like, do we want to pull a heist off even though we know we're under surveillance? This part didn't really work for me. I don't get that he is that motivated when you see him walk away from a job so easily.
See, but I was wondering if it was the noise or the noise and the way that the trucks were configured, that there was something. And you look at him, he's an old crook. He's been doing this obviously a long time. And I think crooks that are successful and never get caught or, get late in life, they've probably walked away from a lot of jobs where the cops weren't there. But if you want a long time career in theft, you should be cautious, and walking away from this job was probably the smart thing to do.
Well, despite the increased police surveillance, McCauley's crew agrees to one last brazen bank robbery. Hanna pulls over McCauley and invites him to coffee. Now, face to face, the aging professionals realize that they're both neglected in their personal lives. Hanna admits his third marriage with Justine is near failure and the toll this takes on his stepdaughter, Lauren. McCauley confides that he doesn't even know how to reconcile his solitary lifestyle with his feelings for his new girlfriend, 80. Now, despite their mutual respect for one another's skill, they both acknowledge that they will not hesitate to kill the other if necessary. When he returns to the office, Hanna realizes that McCauley's crew have all slipped their surveillance.
So this is where we get that scene, that we've all been waiting for with De Niro and Pacino together. They were in The Godfather Part 2, but they never appeared at the same time. So De Niro, before they filmed the scene, he insisted on no rehearsals. He didn't want to sit down and go through it. And normally, they'll do a dry run through or rehearsal of the scene. He said no. He said, I want it to be as if these two characters, they're unfamiliar with each other. This is the first time that they're meeting. Pacino initially balked, but at the end, he bought into it. And I think it works. You could feel them playing and feeling each other out. It seemed very genuine. It seemed like the first time they had done it. And to me, I thought that De Niro owned it. And it was one of the top scenes of the movie.
Yeah, I think this is one of Pacino's stronger scenes in the movie. And at first, again, I was like, talk about balking. I was like, this makes no sense at all. De Niro has no reason to go get a cup of coffee with Pacino. He's being pulled over by the cops. He knows under surveillance. The last thing a cautious crook is going to want to do is give any tells, any sort of reason for the police to be onto him. And thankfully, my dismay was assuaged by the fact that there was that great payoff when we see that the whole point, De Niro was playing Pacino, that McCauley was playing Vincent, and he was actually just giving his guys time to slip and basically lose surveillance. So I thought that was a really, really clever move to explain why this scene was even allowed to take place in this universe.
Well, this, like you said, Big D, I had no idea that this was done without rehearsals, because it does feel like the most genuine conversation in this scene. Like when Pacino's telling De Niro all about his troubles with his relationship and his daughter, and like not wanting to share his feelings, the fact that he had a scene before, he's having the conversation with his wife and he's like, what do you want me to say? You want me to say that I came home to the body of a 5-year-old girl that was raped by her, like that's,
whoa.
Like, do you guys like cops have to do, they have to live with these experiences that they go through day in and day out. And you want to come home and hear about how my day was. Like, that's the last thing I want.
It was a baby in a microwave.
Okay. But that's how I feel constantly in relationships. Like, you guys don't feel that way? Like, the last thing I want to talk about is share my feelings. Like, I don't want any of that.
No, I'm very eager to talk about what I did all day. I didn't find bodies. I recorded a podcast. I went to Krav Maga. I went to work.
Really?
Walked the dog. Like, all that stuff is okay to talk about.
Well, so then that leads me to an interesting question here. If you're only given two choices in life, right, you have to take on the role of one of these two characters and live out their life, not knowing what happens
sure.
in the movie. Would you rather be Vincent, Pacino, the cop, or would you be Neil? Each has its advantages. Like you said, if you're a cop, you come home with the knowledge of what's going on and seeing the scum that's out there on the streets. And if you're Neil, you can't have real ties or relationships. You're one mistake away from going to jail. Which would you choose to live your life?
Well, in this movie, I would choose De Niro's character because he's got the bearer bonds. He could sell them on the black market and be done.
No. I'm saying we start off clean. Tomorrow, you're going to be a detective hunting criminals, or you're going to be Neil, a fairly proficient criminal who has to steal and live on the dark side of the law in order to survive.
Am I a crooked cop? Because let's face it, Pacino's character has this sweet house in LA. It's his third marriage. Are you telling me
it's his wife's
that's
house?
His wife's house? No, but he's this is my postmodern house. No,
my wife.
No. He says. He says no. He actually says her ex-husband's bullshit postmodern house.
Yeah, he says you can fuck my wife in her ex-husband's house, just you can't have my TV.
Oh, well then I'd probably, I don't know. The white knight in me probably says I'd I'd want to be a detective. Like if I'm being honest, I'd probably be the detective. I'd be the guy hunting the criminals. It'd be more fun to be De Niro's character, though.
I'd have to be the cop. As much as I'd like to think that criminal life would be exciting, I'd be too much of a pussy and just be afraid too much I was going to get caught, and I don't want to do jail.
Well, we all know what side Gene's going to be on. He's going to be some fence for some criminal organization.
No, that's the White Knight, Gene Lyons. Come in here and save the day. Tell us, Gene.
Yeah, I can't even play a crook on a video game. Like, I can't play Grand Theft Auto. It makes me too uncomfortable.
He's out there saving people, like putting them back in their cars.
It's totally true. It's totally true. Have either of you ever been in, well, I mean, I know you haven't, Big D, but Raj, you've been in the car with me before.
Yeah.
It's like the most boring ride in the world because I obey every single traffic rule.
I usually drive when we hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're very proud of your 95 Explorer, so.
It's a 99.
You're that proud.
I'm that proud.
Jesus.
Waingro.
Well, hold on. To go back to the movie here, we were talking about whether we could live the lives of a criminal. What Michael Mann wanted the actors to do was to feel what it was like. So he had actually Tom Sizemore, Val Kilmer, and De Niro go out into a bank. He wanted them to case it. They did prosthetics on them so you couldn't identify the actors. And they sent them into a bank to fill out a loan application while Sizemore and Val Kilmer cased the joint. They came back. They walked through it like they were really doing. They were going to do a job on the bank. None of the employees in the banks knew about it. So when they finally filmed the scene, the actor said it helped them understand the process and how they could try to blend in without being by noticed. And I just wonder what bank that was. That if you just had somebody come in and you're like, is this De Niro filling out like a home loan? What the hell is going on?
See, now I believe that Sizemore, Kilmer, and De Niro could get away with it. But if you let Pacino in there, like no matter what the disguise,
I'm casing the joint. Hooah!
It's exactly what he's saying.
Nobody look over here.
Raj, you familiar with what casing a joint is?
That's when you smoke weed with people that you are meeting for the first time. You case a joint together to build that friendship.
Exactly.
Waingro threatens information out of Trejo, having made a deal with Van Zant. Acting on a tip from Van Zant's bodyguard, Hugh Binney, played by Henry Rollins, the LAPD intercept the crew just as they are leaving the bank, resulting in a massive shootout in downtown LA. Bosco and other police officers are killed while McCauley loses Chirito and his alternate driver, Donald Breeden, paid by Dennis Haysbert. A dying Trejo reveals Waingro's betrayal, prompting McCauley to kill Van Sant. Edie realizes McCauley is a criminal, but ultimately agrees to flee the country with him. Chris attempts to reconnect with his wife, Charlene, who's played by Ashley Judd, who is also helping the LAPD with a sting operation. She changes her mind and helps him escape, albeit without a way to keep their son Dominic in Chris's life. So again, if this seems complicated as I'm reading it, it's because there's so many things that are happening in this movie. It's nuts.
No, I think
you've got a wife of the right-hand man that is double crossing. You also have Trejo who betrayed. You also have Waingro. You have Van Sant. Like all these betrayals are happening. You're like, do we need this many guys? It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet of betrayals.
Yeah, it's real world. That's the way it goes. You think like bank robbers go home and just everything's unicorns and rainbows? No, there's a lot of shit that goes on in people's lives that affect what they're doing for their professional lives.
Yeah, but it's all the same thing.
Yeah, I would suggest that if you like something a little simpler but along the same lines, to watch True Romance, but you didn't like that either. So I think you might just not like the genre.
No, I very much like this genre because I think I made a comment on Twitter like if you basically put Al Pacino in a Batman suit and dressed up De Niro as the Joker and Two-Face would be Val Kilmer. Like this is the Dark Knight, right? Without the costumes. Like this movie, I really enjoy, and this type of genre I really enjoyed. Like Den of Thieves, I just recently watched, was fantastic. A lot of double crossing there, but done in a manner that's like easy to follow along as an audience. So I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of characters here. Like did you need the entire subplot of Dennis Haysert's character, the black chef? The guy who's like trying to impress his wife by, being a good person to society and reacquainting. It takes a 60-second conversation with De Niro's character, and he's like, fuck it, I'm back in the game. I'll be your driver. Let's do this shit, like, right now.
So if he's not there, who's driving the car?
It doesn't matter. Like, you didn't have to have Trejo, like, double cross, which also, like, Waingro already went to Van Sant. You didn't need Trejo also double crossing the team by also going to Van Sant.
No, Trejo didn't go to Van Sant. Waingro killed his wife and then got the information out of him and then killed him.
Right, but he gave up information.
He was being tortured. He didn't remember.
You didn't need that entire subplot, is what I mean. You needed Trejo's character. You couldn't just have Waingro go and say, "Hey, Van Sant, here's all the information."
Where did he get it?
Where did Waingro get the information?
Yes.
On this job?
No, without him getting Trejo, how does he know what their next job was? Waingro wasn't around for the second job.
Oh, okay. Well, how did he get Trejo? How did he know it was Trejo's wife?
Because he went to Trejo's house and there was a woman there who was probably about the same age as him.
But how did you know Trejo? How do you know that Trejo worked for McCauley?
Because
he was on the job with him last time.
They were in the back of the ambulance together.
Oh, all right. Well, now this movie makes more sense.
It should. Oh, but I want to talk so we're talking about actors here, and a lot of times in films, it doesn't have that real sense of combat, and that's because the actors are just pretending. But in this movie, they really went above and beyond, and Michael Mann required that the actors, especially for what now is the pinnacle of the movie, is the downtown firefight where they're trying to get out of the bank. And the police surprised them because they figured it out. They got the information from the informant. They put two and two together. They know the bank that's going to get hit. So each of the actors in the firefight had to train for 3 months. And they conducted actual multiple live fire rehearsals. They built a scale replica of downtown, not the buildings, but the road and where they were going to maneuver from position to position. So the actors all went and fired and rehearsed this with real live bullets. So when they finally went down and shot it in downtown LA, they were using blanks. It was almost like they had run through the real thing. This was just pretend, and it was easy. Each of the takes, they ran through 800 to 1,000 rounds. And in the training, the police and the crew all trained separately. So when they finally put them in the scene together, it wasn't too synchronized like a dance, like even though they had rehearsed it, and it seemed real.
Wasn't there a lot of controversy when this movie came out because it almost gave a blueprint for people if they wanted to hold up a bank and they wanted to like wanted to have a shootout with the LAPD? Wasn't there like a real robbery that happened shortly thereafter?
Yeah, so the shootout came after, and in my mind, I remembered that they were very similar, but other than that they were in LA, they were different in a lot of ways. So it was a North Hollywood bank shooting. It was in February of 97. So there were two gentlemen who walked into the North Hollywood Bank of the Bank of America branch. They confronted LAPD as they exited, and the shootout began. And the police at this point, remember this is 97, they were only usually carrying their 9mm pistols. Some had 38 special revolvers, and most of the patrol cars had 12 gauges. But these two dudes, like the crew, this gunman carried illegally modified AK-47 variants. One of them had a Bushmaster XM15. They had a couple pistols. They had a Heckler and Mach. They had an HK-91 rifle. They also had, I think, a Beretta 92 FS. And what made them different was these dudes had built full body armor, homemade heavy plate body armor, and they were almost covered from head to toe. So the police were shooting at them and hitting them center mass, and it was doing nothing. The police at this point, they weren't equipped to handle something like this. So where Pacino and the crew and Kilmer were running down the street shooting cops, they weren't armored up. But these two dudes were so armored up and the police were so ineffective that the police had to go into local gun shops to try to get weapons, AR-15s and some higher caliber weapons that could take them down, because the shootout just kept going on. They had these two guys pinned down. They carjacked someone in a pickup truck. The police were hitting them multiple times but couldn't kill them. So the shootout spilled into the residential streets. One of the guys was shot and mortally wounded. The second gunman then was hiding behind a truck and shooting cops left and right. The police finally, what they did was they realized that they hadn't covered their lower legs. So they lean down and were shooting under the car and skipping the rounds off the street and hit one of the gunmen in the legs. He goes down, he starts bleeding out, and the police just sat there, which I can't blame them. I honestly can't blame them because, in the end, we had 12 police officers were shot, 8 civilians were injured. There was almost 2,000 rounds. So for them to let this gunman just lay there and bleed out, they refused to let paramedics in. Family eventually sued the city of LA and the police department and lost. But I can't blame them after this went on for hours that you would not just let this guy just lay there and die.
Well, let that be a lesson to you kids. If you want to hold up a bank and you want to, go fully armored, make sure you armor your legs. Don't skip leg day, guys. That's what we're saying. But like everyone points that this is the apex. This is the scene. If you're going to watch Heat, you got to watch this because it does take a little bit of a realism to it. But there's still tropes that are happening in this, like firing indiscriminately into an open crowd. You're not seeing a lot of civilians go down. You see a few of them, but then you had Al Pacino, old man Al Pacino, 55-year-old Al Pacino running. He's running. And then he comes around a corner, steadies himself and takes a shot and makes the headshot on Tom Sizemore's character as he's holding a baby. Come on. Are you telling? There's no way that baby survives.
Baby, that was like a child, but
it doesn't matter. Like all kids under the age of 5 look the same to me.
So let me talk to you. Okay. The movie did a lot of things well and they did some things wrong. So I'll try to break them down for you. What they did well was it is really difficult to shoot, move, and communicate, especially with that much weight. You can do it fairly efficiently, but when you're throwing 90 pounds, and that's what it is. So the amount of money they were carrying was $12.2 million. In $100 notes, that breaks out to 268 pounds. So that's 90 pounds each that they were carrying in their duffel bag. So when you try to shoot with that much weight, it causes you to have an unstable shooting platform. So it would make you more inaccurate. But what they do really well here is they perform a down man drill. So not on top of them carrying the 90 pounds of the money, Kilmer's shot, De Niro's got to pick him up, pick his bag up, and drag him down. And it's fairly believable. But what really, I think, stuns people, you said how this is a blueprint, was how proficient they were at weapon manipulation and rapid mag changes. They even had that the U.S. Marine Corps, that their recruiting center and training in San Diego used Val Kilmer doing a mag change in the back of the cab as an actual teaching instrument. They said, if you can't do it faster than an actor can, you don't deserve to carry that weapon. We remember in Predator 2 where we were laughing at Danny Glover that he knocked the car door off and he was putting the bulletproof vest up against the window. Bullets will fly through most parts of the car. The only part that you could really hide behind is an engine block. So when they're moving from car to car, it's so subtle you don't even see it. They're using bound through and cover and concealment behind the engine blocks. It's something you don't really see in Hollywood.
Yeah, and in addendum to that, also, you notice that they're working perfectly as a fire team of 3. And the second that you see Sizemore get separated, there's a volley of bullets that causes him to duck behind the van, and he gets separated from the other 2. You know he's fucked. Like, he is fucked at that point because he's not a part of the team anymore. And again, I can't speak to how accurate that is as far as a combat situation. If you're working in a group of 3 and you end up solo, you're done for. Like, you might as well just give up.
Right. And what they're doing is they're bounding forward. So what they do is they have one person is shooting a base fire. So he's firing at full auto to try to get the cops to duck their head down. Then the next shooter moves to the next firing position. He picks up the volley of fire. The next one moves. So you're almost leapfrogging down the road to the end of where the police are. But that gets to some of the problems we have where Roger was saying the police were shooting indiscriminately. The police that are behind De Niro and Kilmer are firing at them, and over their heads behind them is the police barricade.
Right.
One of the primary rules of firing a weapon is you have to know what your target is and what's behind it. The cops are reckless. They're just shooting all over the place. There's probably 25 civilians that are killed. There's probably 2 or 3 cops that are fratricide. That was one of the mistakes that they're doing in this movie, was how reckless the cops were with the gun. But then they go ahead and make up with it. Sizemore busting his ass in the fountain. I wonder if that was a mistake or that just was, they told him, hey, fall down, because it seemed very real.
Yeah, knowing Sizemore, he's probably high on coke. But I I had posted this on Twitter. I was like, listen, I just finished my 3 hours. I don't really get Heat. So this entire scene, this indiscriminate killing of civilians, it immediately makes me say, well, these are the bad guys. Like, I don't want De Niro to win anymore. If the whole concept is I'm still rooting for the good guy or the bad guy, like, this is the scene that makes it turn towards, like, of course I don't want these guys firing, in killing civilians.
I completely disagree. The cops are being fucking hot dogs in this situation. So, as De Niro says when they're robbing the bank, this isn't your money. This is the bank's money, and it's insured. Nobody has to die for any of this. Okay, I got my truck stolen out of my driveway. I saw the guy do it. I was armed. This is me, Gene Lyons, real life. I was armed. I saw the guy do it. I'm not shooting the guy. You know why? Because my truck is insured. I'm covered. The cops show up. They chase him down the road. They say, we're sorry, there was a high-speed chase. We had to let him go. It was too dangerous. I said, I totally understand. I don't want anybody getting killed over money or over a car. This is Pacino having a boner for catching these guys, and the cops are being reckless about it.
So you're saying it's the cops. Like, listen, if it's the cops' fault for even opening fire on them. Who opened the first fire? It was Kilmer.
No,
it wasn't.
But that's
Kilmer is the one that opens fire. He sees that they've been had.
Right, but
that's not on the police.
No, but the police take it to the next level.
The police are there. They're the ones that are trying to stop this shooting from being prevented.
Okay, so you have Al Pacino, who is a detective, right? He's not a beat cop. He's not out practicing with his weapon all the time. He's out trying to solve cases. He's carrying around now a high caliber assault rifle, essentially. He's at a full dead sprint. He's been running for 5 or 10 minutes. He sees now Sizemore come out, bust his ass in the fountain, pick up a child. And this detective, who's out of breath, hasn't probably fired that weapon, is going to risk taking a headshot to hit that girl.
That's what I said earlier.
There's no way he would do that. Or
that's a trope. Of course.
It's not a trope. It's showing that look at the conversation that Pacino has with his wife, soon to be ex-wife, in the hospital. He said it's not about necessarily doing the good thing. It's about me getting my man and going after the chase. He does it to a level that's reckless, and he's not doing it for the right reasons. He just wants to win. And if that means nicking that poor girl's head, he's going to take the shot.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Would it have been better had he nicked the little kid? Would it have been better?
I don't want any children being shot. No,
but I'm saying, like, it would have absolutely shown to the audience, like, that this guy is a hothead. Like,
I got it. He was a hothead.
Sizemore's character is surrounded. If you want to create a gritty, realistic depiction of what it's like to be a guy who's been like, I've been struggling, and then you take a shot that you shouldn't have, and you end up killing a civilian as a result, you get your man, but it came at a price. Maybe even the little girl's like injured. You could have done something like that. You don't have to kill the girl. Maybe it goes through her arm or something like that.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, this is an officer-involved shooting. He's not carrying any weapon or pursuing anybody for any amount of time. Like, they're investigating the whole damn thing. Pacino's not going to be on the street the next day. Like, certainly not in any of these situations. So whether he'd shot the kid or not, I mean, he should have been pulled in. You're going to have an internal investigation, all that shit. So it's a little weird that all of LAPD just forgot about the shooting a day later.
Well, to be fair, it is the LAPD in 95. There was a lot of other things that were going on with the LAPD. I mean, this is height LAPD being corrupt. But this movie is super loud. Like, you mentioned to me to turn it up or watch with headphones. It did not disappoint. Megan had to not be here, so I could fully get the Heat experience. This entire thing, I think, killed my hearing for at least 6 hours. Because there's just so much gunshots, so much loud bangs that are happening.
Raj, I think I probably know the answer with you, but Big D, have you ever just gone on YouTube and just put on headphones and then just put on an A10 Warthog video and just watch that for a while?
Yeah, I've seen those guys live. It sounds like a dragon. It's impressive.
Yeah, so there's a range out here in Arizona where you can actually see it, and it is... for me, I mean, I love the sound of gunfire. I know that sounds weird, and that's about as a privileged American as I can say, but like, it really makes me happy. It feels good. And so I mean, Carrie was like, what is this, like 15 minutes of straight gunfire? And I was like, yeah, this is wonderful. Like, I am loving this.
And if I can describe it to somebody who's never heard it, it sounds less like gunfire. You're talking about an A10? It sounds like a truck has drifted off the side of the road and it's hitting the rumble strips. It sounds like the tires on a rumble strip on an 18-wheeler on a highway going 70 miles an hour.
It's the sound it makes is BRRRT. It's brrt, brrt,
brrt. I also want to mention that, like, I was most excited about seeing Danny Trejo just show up in this film because Danny Trejo in 95 was ripped. He was like a scary, always played like that scary assassin. He's Machete, right? I was once served cold, refreshing Bud Light from Danny Trejo at a Dallas Cowboys football game that I just happened to be there. This was a couple of years ago. Dude is not as ripped as he used to be, but still just an awesome guy. Like, just slinging Bud Lights. He like got up on the bar and was handed out. It was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun.
Hold on. The dude's not as ripped as he was. He's like 80 years old.
I'm just saying. I mean, look at Schwarzenegger. He's still pumped.
Have you seen Schwarzenegger with his shirt off lately?
He looks great.
It's like a McDonald's soft serve cone on a hot day. It's not good.
I was thinking it's like an old leather chair, like a leather beanbag.
You guys are terrible.
But Trejo, he had done only, I think, stunt work really before this.
No, he had been in Desperado. Desperado came out.
No, that was after this.
No, Desperado is 94, 95.
Desperado was after this. Yeah.
What year?
So was Dust Till Dawn. It's 95, but what was released first?
Yeah, but Desperado.
Oh, it's irrelevant.
Vincent finds Lauren in the bathtub after a suicide attempt and rushes her to the hospital. He and Justine agree to go their separate ways after learning that Lauren has survived. Meanwhile, McCauley is free to leave the country with Edie, but learns of Waingro's location and gets revenge. Before McCauley can return to Edie and escape, he is spotted and forced to flee on foot, leaving her behind. Hannah pursues McCauley at onto the tarmac at LAX and mortally wounds him. Hannah takes his hand as McCauley succumbs to his injuries in movie.
Okay, so this is the only point in the movie where I felt like I was smarter than the actual filmmakers. Pacino walks into his hotel room. He's given it up. He thinks that Neil has left the country. They're gone. He walks into the hotel room, and you see on the floor, there's a giant wet mark. And I immediately thought, what a fucking shitty hotel. Why is this dude staying in a shithole that has the carpet that looks like somebody took a shit on it? It looks like somebody gave birth to a child. He walks in, puts his stuff down. You're this great detective. How do you not pick up, hey, we got a water leak here. Let's go look in the tub. Why did I have to do that? I'm a part-time podcaster. And I picked up on it.
Well, I think the alternative, though, is if he discovered her in the tub and then somebody would be like, notice in that scene when he walks in, there's no water on the ground. There would be. If so, so either way, they're fucked.
What if this is just like a memory that's been implanted in Al Pacino's head, and it's not really it's not an accurate depiction? Maybe Al Pacino's in the bathtub. Oh, wait a minute. We're not doing Westworld anymore, are we?
Raj, you mentioned with the prostitute scene and whether it was necessary or not. Did you think this whole child suicide thing was necessary?
No, not at all.
No.
You could have you could have had them reconcile, at the end after Pacino shoots, the kid by killing Sizemore. You could have them reconcile then and have this whole thing, or you could have done it at the end of the movie. Like for as great as the opening scene is, the action and that shootout scene in the middle of the movie, LAPD, the final scene in the tarmac between Pacino and De Niro was slow. It's a very weak ending. He tumbles. I guess it's an airport hotel that he kills Waingro at. And then it's a pre 9/11 shootout that's very lame. And then they're going to hold hands at the end. Come on, man.
Hold on. Let's back this up a bit.
Just hit fast forward on the podcast.
Let's back this up a bit, okay? So one thing we've seen about De Niro's character the whole movie, he's disciplined. If you can't walk away from something in 30 seconds when you feel the heat, then you're doing the wrong thing. You can't have ties to anything. He breaks that cardinal rule by falling for Edie. I'll let that go. You're getting away with it. You have your cut of $12 million. You have Edie. You have a potential for a life. And then, of course, he gets the call that tells him, because the informants have put on the street where Waingro's hiding. I got to believe that Neil's going to let that go.
Yeah.
Neil can always come back. He can find Waingro in 10 years, or Waingro's probably going to OD in a week or two. or he's going to get killed.
100%.
Would you guys risk it?
100%.
What would you do? Would you take Edie, get to a plane and fly away,
Yes.
or go try to get Waingro?
That's what I thought would happen. Like you would realize, like, hey, maybe I don't need to hold on to, all these things that have been weighing me down. Maybe for the first time, I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm going to take this woman that I actually love, the first time I've actually loved someone, and I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to walk away from killing Waingro. And, he gets stopped. And as a result, is killed. You know what I mean? Like he's trying to get out and they pull him back in. I understand that was Pacino, but like, that's what would have been a better fitting for the end of this movie versus, well, he, fell back into his impulses, went and killed Waingro. That was successful. But then, has to walk away and he gets killed on the tarmac. I don't know. This movie has a very weak ending, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can tell that it doesn't quite, the decision doesn't make sense after De Niro gets off the phone with Jon Voight, and Jon Voight's like, not that you would care or anything, but just so you know, Waingro's at this hotel. And then De Niro, he's sitting there in silence, and I can tell what they're trying to do. The look on his face is showing the conflict there that, he doesn't care. Maybe he does care. He's wrestling with it, and then he just pulls off the thing. But you can tell De Niro was having a hard time pulling it off just because it was so ridiculous. Even getting to him would be difficult. The cops are so inept.
Yeah. Seriously, was I the only one who felt when we saw that tight shot of Nate on the phone with De Niro?
Mm-hmm.
Am I the only one who felt the camera was going to pull back and you were going to see Vincent sitting there telling him either with a gun or saying, hey, make the call? I got the vibe that there was that Nate was setting him up to get caught.
Okay, one possibility that would explain it, and this is Gene's, Tales from the Dark Side, is that De Niro, McCauley, doesn't want to get away. Like in the sense that he can't let it go, that there's a subconscious part of him that recognizes that leaving with Edie and getting on that plane and going to New Zealand is not what he wants. Like he needs to hold on to this life. He can't let it go.
Yeah, just like you have Pacino always needs to be hunting. He always needs to have somebody to get vengeance on. But De Niro gets into the hotel and he sees that the guy behind the counter, there's a shotgun there. The cops have the hotel surveilled.
Yeah.
You know that they're surrounded.
Get out.
You got to turn yourself around.
You got to walk away.
There's no way you're going to get away with it.
You got to walk away. You got to leave. Like, I don't know. Like,
pull the fire alarm, I guess.
Just a bad move.
Also, what did he think Edie was going to do when she was sitting in the car and he pulls the fire alarm? The fire department shows up. Everybody's evacuating the building. She thinks she's going to be like, that seems okay. Everything seems okay.
I'm waiting for my convict boyfriend to come out after he kills this henchman. But all right. So now thank you for at least explaining a few things. But the other thing I don't get. So Val Kilmer is billed as one of the three leads in this movie. He's barely in the movie. Like he's in the movie, but he's not a huge component of the movie. Like the whole subplot of Val Kilmer's character with the wife that is also an informant, but yet
she's not an informant.
She's not an informant.
She goes to the police.
No, the police nab her. The police lure her and then get her and say, hey, you're going to jail. Your son is going to grow up in foster care unless you help us go get Chris. So she doesn't know what to do. So she picks up the phone, calls Chris, lures him into the trap, and then at the last second, which surprised me, she waves him off with the hand signal, saying, hey, get out of here.
And then the cops, who apparently have never seen a photograph of Chris, go,
no.
Well, this guy's got a haircut and a different name. You're okay.
But didn't they
wonder why he looks like he's stroked out, like his whole left side of his body won't move?
Yeah, did Val Kilmer look bloated? Like that was some reshoots, weren't they?
I think they actually took that scene straight from the end of Tombstone because he looked exactly like Doc Holliday in his deathbed.
Again, you could have not had that. You could have had just him dying. You could have had that character die in the shootout. You didn't need it.
You do, because
you think you need it?
Yes.
I think it shows you all different variations of what could happen. You have right there, he's a gambler. He's a degenerate gambler. He says, my life, my day, my son rises and falls with his wife, but yet he's breaking shit in the house. He's gambling their money away. He's reckless. So in the end, it's ironic that he's the least disciplined and he's the one who ends up surviving. So you needed that. You couldn't have everyone die because it doesn't teach you necessarily any morality lessons or play. But I just wish, if anything, they could have done better. Roger, you're complaining is that final standoff made a little more logistical and logical sense.
Yeah, I get the chase. I get that they were ducking and diving, and for the most part of that pursuit, I thought it was pretty good. Although I don't think either of those guys could run that far,
No.
But anyway, but they make it onto the tarmac or whatever, and they have this great scene where De Niro comes around the last sort of barrier before the runway of the airport, and he notices that every time a plane comes into land, all these bright lights turn on to signal the plane. And the plane also has a bright light, and so you're temporarily blinded. So he's blinded. He finds cover and realizes that when Pacino comes around the corner, he too will be blinded if he times it right. All great. So the movie's setting you up to believe that De Niro's going to get the drop on Pacino, and then it surprises you by Pacino miraculously seeing De Niro's shadow and firing into the bright lights and miraculously hitting him multiple times with a fairly good grouping. Here's where that falls apart for me: is if you've ever Raj, you helped me do the green screen at that party, couple parties. And when we set up that lighting, we set up that strobe. And the idea is with the umbrella is to have it bounce the light around the subject so that shadows aren't created on the green screen. Same principle applies to that sort of an array of lighting. It's such a wide and bright light that it actually would wrap around the subject and no shadow would be created. A. B. De Niro's not a fucking moron. Why would he come out from behind cover to shoot his target? You put the gun and one eye maybe around the corner and you got a clean shot. It makes no sense.
Not to mention it's very slow. And I don't know, it just...
Wait, what part is slow?
Oh, I'll tell you this. What was when you think of The Dark Knight...
It's called tense.
It wasn't very intense. When you watch The Dark Knight, what's the most intense moments of action for you?
I imagine it's when Batman.
Why'd you say Martha?
No, wrong movie.
Wrong Batman. No, so it's the opening heist with the Joker and like how it's showing how each henchman has a specific job and like so that's a really good opening. The opening heist.
No, you said what's the most. What's the most tense?
Right, and then the second one is when Batman is chasing Joker through the streets of Gotham, and then the
that's
whole
not tense.
You don't think that's intense?
Listen, that's
when
exhilarating.
The semi-truck?
Okay, that's exhilarating. We're talking here about tension. If you want tension in Batman,
I had I was bored, is what I'm saying.
That's fine. Where you have what's Gyllenhaal's name?
Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Okay, well, where Maggie Gyllenhaal's on the phone with Harvey.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we don't know which one of them is going to explode.
Right.
And you see Batman running to one. That's tension, right? So this scene is slow. It's plotting. It's to build the tension that you don't know who's going to get the jump on the other person. I just wish they had shot it differently. I'm okay with it. And I got to go against you here. I was okay in the end with the hand holding. That made me okay with the scene because it was a bond between the two men who realized, hey, if you had gotten the drop on me, you would have shot in me. They both understood it. It was like, hey, good game. You won. Respect. The hand holding as he died. That made me okay in the end.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching this scene and De Niro's waiting for Pacino, Pacino's not showing up, you're like, is he going to come around the other side?
Yep.
Is he, where is he? And again, that takes me, talk about lots of movies. Aliens, when, they're waiting for, where are the aliens? And they're seeing them pop up on the radar, blip, blip, blip. Boop, it's slow. Boop, or Jurassic Park, when they're hiding from the velociraptors in the kitchen. Again, it slows down a little bit, but that tension builds. I thought it was appropriately paced. I just thought that I really wanted Pacino to die.
Oh God, yes.
Well, now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat Meter and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, 0 wipes is a perfect movie. 5 wipes is a terrible movie. We'll start with you, Dick.
So I think this is not just an action movie. I think the dialogue's complex. The characters are rich, truly vetted characters like real people. So they're not stuck in a typical cops and robber cliche. It's not Ocean's 11. The action sequences are expertly created and faithful to reality. The downtown Los Angeles shootout still remains one of the most celebrated action sequences in film history. You could show the scene or reference it to anybody who might not even see the movie, and everyone remembers it. You briefly mentioned Christopher Nolan and the influence it had. Christopher Nolan admitted that he took much of his shooting style from Michael Mann, and I'm going to include a link to it where they do The Dark Knight and a lot of Michael Mann films shot for shot, side by side, and you can see Dark Knight is almost an homage to most of Michael Mann's work. They use a similar shooting style. So I think it besides the fact that this movie influenced some of the true masterpieces later on in the 2000s and 2010s, I think it's a perfect blend of style and realism. A lot of fun. It was 3 hours, but I enjoyed the entire 3 hours. I don't think there's a better thriller, cop, crime heist, action noir than this. I'm giving it a half a wipe. I think it was very little you could do to improve it. I think it's Michael Mann's masterpiece, and it was surprisingly for me, it was a half wipe. And I got to thank Zach again for making me watch it.
Gene, how many wipes do you give this movie?
I'm going to agree with Big D. Of all the movies we've watched from 1980 to 1999, I think this one has aged the best. It doesn't feel old at all. This is right up there with Pulp Fiction as far as keeping its value. The cast is incredible, and I can forgive the so-so ending. The only thing that I would really ding this movie on is Pacino as a goofy distraction. And I kept thinking of who would be better as the cop, and I nailed it. If they'd cast Bruce Willis as Vincent, this movie is perfect, right? He plays a little more straight. He's a little more likable. You're more torn, as Grandmaster B said. We should be torn between the cops and the robbers here. And I felt that most people watching this, particularly me, were very squarely on the side of the robbers and didn't really care for the cops at all. I mean, for fuck's sake, Bosco gets killed and nobody gives a shit. And they really want us to. And he did a good job dying, by the way. I thought it was a really good death face. I thought it was pretty good. But overall, with Pacino as a distraction and the so-so ending, I got to agree with Big D. This is a half a wipe movie.
Really? Half a wipe for both of you. I am not going to be I'm not going to give as much of a pass on this movie as I think you guys overlook. I feel like this movie is overly bloated with subplots that could have been tighter. Again, I've called this out. Pacino's marriage is on the rocks because he's in a job that makes his life difficult. It's not enough that his third wife is cheating. Let's throw in his stepdaughter is suicidal. But wait, there's another subplot of the wife and the child of De Niro's right-hand man that leaves him and is captured by the feds. Will Kilmer's love for her and kid be strong enough? Or, is he going to turn his back on this life? It doesn't matter because that that Nazi guy double-crossed De Niro. But wait, let's explore another subplot of a criminal that's trying to make it back into civilian life. And then, another criminal whose wife was murdered and that's why he gave it up. It's like, there's just so much that's going on in this that I feel like average moviegoers can get lost in that. The payoff for this movie is the beginning and in the middle, but even those have their flaws. I don't think that the movie holds up in terms of the plot, the bearer bonds. Who cares about bearer bonds? It's all computers these days. But I like the fact that they used, realistic stuff. And I just feel like the pacing is very slow. That's Michael Mann's kind of deal. For me, unfortunately, I'm not going to go as high as you guys. It's not a bad movie. It's fun. I mean, it's not fun, but I'm glad I watched it. It's 2.5 wipes. For me, it's average. It's there's good and there's bad to this movie.
Gene, can I offer an alternate here? Instead of your Bruce Willis, I will raise you a Denzel Washington.
Yes, Denzel also works in this case. I was really afraid right there, and I don't know why I got. Maybe you're just your brainwaves are getting mixed up over the internet. But I thought for a second you were going to say Eddie Murphy, and I was about to lose my shit. So yes, I was just trying to think of other cops I've seen on screen, and I was like, Danny Glover, no.
I mean, just picture, and granted, it's 6 years later. Training Day, the cop Denzel plays. If you play a cleaner version of him, 6 years younger, they're in the same age range.
I don't know. I think Gerard Butler does a very good job of playing Pacino's character in Den of Thieves. Go watch Den of Thieves. It's great. It's fantastic. I enjoyed it. Double crossing.
Yeah. So with Roger's 2.5 wipes and mine and Dick's half a wipes, that comes out to an average of 1.16 repeating for Heat.
Okay, so that ties it now in the 17 spot with Coming to America and Raising Arizona. It is better than The Breakfast Club and Shawshank Redemption. It is worse than The Terminator and Seven.
Yeah, that feels right.
No, this movie's way better than Seven.
No, I think.
Yeah, I think Seven's a bit too high.
I think I think Seven's exactly where it needs to be. I think Shawshank is better than Heat, but
yeah, I mean, when I think of action sequences, I think of Kevin Spacey jumping out of windows and running down alleyways. Really exciting shit.
That entire movie, you love. It's your type of movie. We don't get to see the serial killer until 90 minutes.
But again, look, we're slicing real thin here because it's a difference between, there's the one wipe movies that we have. We have 4 of them that are one wipe: Terminator, Rounders, and Conan the Barbarian. So the next level down.
Yeah, the Conan and Rounders do not.
No way. Conan's great.
Those are worse movies, you think?
Thank God Conan didn't have any subplots, or Raj would have just been furious.
I didn't get to watch.
Raj wasn't there. That's why. Conan was
scary.
awesome.
All right.
No, but I think it's fair.
That's fine.
Wait, why is he going into this cult?
What's that big wheel? The Wheel of Pain? Who built that?
If I had watched the movie, I'd understand your references.
How many times? How does he get a pee break?
I don't get it. I don't understand what you guys are talking about.
But guys, seriously, did we need the Riddle of Steel? I mean, what is the Riddle of Steel all about?
Shoutouts.
And James Earl Jones's hair is ridiculous. No, that's not realistic. You couldn't grow that in that time period.
That's definitely ridiculous. If you go back and just GIF James Earl Jones Conan, you'll see what we're talking about. Now it's time for the podcast where we give our shout outs and our next movie category. We have any shout outs?
Yeah, well, we have a special shout out that I got here, and to show you what a small world it is. I have 2 close friends who are police officers in upstate New York. And one of them is a drill instructor currently at the police academy. And a few weeks ago, they were drilling some new recruits, and they asked them to sit down and introduce themselves and, tell the group what they do in their free time and what they like. And one of the cadets or recruits decides to get up. He said he listens to podcasts about TV shows that he watches. And my friend said, "So really, why don't you tell me more about this?" And the cadet recruit says, "Yes, I listened to something called Shat on TV."
What?
She then said, "Really? Well, let me tell you something." So she texted me, and the recruit's name is Zach Colin, and he's a recruit in Session 65 of Zone 5 Regional Law Enforcement Training Academy. And he's hired by the University of SUNY Albany. So I wanted to give him a special shout out, tell him thanks for listening, and just how ironic it is that our podcast is reaching. It's like, what is it? What do they say? The 6 steps of Kevin Bacon, or what is it? The 6
degrees.
6 degrees. So this is like what the 3 degrees of Dick Ebert. It's amazing, impressive. Thank you very much for listening, Zach, and I hope you make it through. And thank you for protecting all the students at SUNY Albany.
Remember, Zach, when in doubt, shoot for the heels or ricochet off the ground.
Yes.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. By the way, this is our Heat episode. This is extra bloated. We probably could have cut 45 minutes from this podcast, but we're going to leave it in. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us everywhere on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow Shat the Movies. Our Facebook is Shat the Movies Podcast. Our website where you can vote on upcoming movies is shatthemovies.com. If you want to send in a suggestion for a movie category, our email address is host@shatthemovies.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, and Game of Thrones. You can find all the information at our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Great Ass Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us, next week for the following movie. Just stick around. You'll hear the trailer. Thanks so much for listening. Take care. Good night and good luck.
This one will drive you absolutely mad.
The riots began because the stores could not meet the demands of Sutter Kane's novel, In the Mouth of Madness.
Kane disappeared 2 months ago without a trace.
You're the guy that writes horror books.
You can forget about Stephen King. Kane outsells them all.
I need to know if he's alive or dead, and I need that book.
It's a setup. I just have to work out how it's set up.
Kane's writing has been known to have an effect on his readers.
See this? It's a map. This whole thing has been staged.
You just get out.
This is not reality.
It's all happening for real, Trent.
I know this book will drive people crazy.
Well, let's hope so. The movie comes out next month.
Val Kilmer is an absolute terrible spotter. You got one job. What was that giant puff of smoke? What, are you vaping?
Yep.
No, you're not. Oh, Jesus. Okay, sorry.